The decision was made behind a closed door, without ceremony, photographers, or even the knowledge of the Queen. Prince Edward placed the Balmoral Ring into Lady Louise's hand and told his daughter that it now belonged to her. But the transfer carried more than sentimental meaning. It quietly removed a treasured royal object from Camilla's reach, and when she finally discovered what had happened, the silence surrounding the decision became more devastating than the decision itself. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Edward did not speak at once. He opened the small velvet case at Bagshot Park and let the moment settle between them. The Balmoral Ring was a private royal heirloom, meaning it belonged to the family rather than the official crown collection, and it carried memories of loyalty, continuity, and summers spent at the Scottish estate. The late Queen had connected it to a private family arrangement, and her youngest son had guarded it as a promise. Now he looked at Louise and said, "This was never meant to become a prize, it was meant to remain a promise." She stared at the ring but did not reach for it. Louise understood that accepting it could place her at the center of a struggle she had never asked to enter, and fear tightened the silence around her. Edward felt pride in his daughter's restraint, yet sadness shadowed it, because he knew the choice could be read as a rejection of Camilla rather than protection. Still, he slid the case closer. The transfer was permanent. A sealed family inventory, a confidential record listing held royal possessions, had already been updated to name his daughter as the ring's recognized custodian. That entry meant the handover was neither symbolic nor temporary. It had been decided, recorded, and completed before the Queen knew anything had changed. Camilla discovered the truth elsewhere. An aide reviewing objects available for ceremonial use at Balmoral noticed the ring had vanished from the list and carried the papers to her. She read the page twice, her expression hardening as the omission became clear. "Who authorized this?" she demanded. The aide hesitated, knowing the answer would turn a missing object into a family confrontation. Then one name broke the silence: Edward. Camilla set the document down, ordered a private meeting, and asked why Louise had been trusted with something she had never been told was leaving. The ring had already changed hands, but before Camilla could confront the man who gave it away, she needed to understand why Lady Louise had been chosen over everyone else. Lady Louise had never chased the spotlight, demanded a title, or positioned herself as a future power inside the monarchy. That was precisely why the choice cut so deeply. To Edward, his daughter represented duty without ambition. To Camilla, however, the transfer suggested something colder, that a quiet young woman had been trusted with a royal legacy the Queen herself had not been permitted to oversee. Beneath the dispute over jewelry lay a far more dangerous question: who was considered worthy? Louise remained alone after the handover, the velvet case closed between her hands. She had grown up under Edward and Sophie's careful guidance, taught that royal birth brought responsibility rather than automatic privilege. Her parents had deliberately protected her from the hunger for status that could consume life inside the monarchy, and that restraint now made the gift feel heavier. "Will accepting this hurt someone?" she asked quietly. Edward heard the fear beneath the question. He told his daughter that she had taken nothing from Camilla, but his pause betrayed him. He knew the Queen might not see the matter so simply. Balmoral mattered because it was more than a royal residence. It was the Scottish estate where the family guarded private memories away from official duty. For him, it remained inseparable from the late Queen, from long conversations, family summers, and traditions she expected her children to preserve after her death. Sophie had known what her husband intended. The trusted confidant waited outside the room because she believed the exchange should belong only to father and daughter, without advice or pressure shaping Louise's answer. She also understood why he had chosen her. Months earlier, the young royal had declined another piece of family jewelry, saying she did not want to wear something simply because it carried status. That refusal convinced Edward that she viewed inheritance as stewardship, the duty to protect something for the future, rather than possession. At Clarence House, Camilla read the revised inventory twice. The inventory was the formal record identifying where important family objects were held and who controlled them. She placed the document flat on the desk and asked why she had been the final person to learn the truth. Her anger concealed something more painful. She feared the transfer was not an isolated choice, but part of a quiet pattern in which cherished objects were being directed away from her influence before she could claim any role in their future. Louise feared she had caused a division. Edward feared he had exposed his daughter to it. Camilla feared the family had already decided she could never be fully trusted. Yet his reasoning had not begun with the Queen's authority, or even with the ring itself. It had begun months earlier, during one painfully awkward evening at Balmoral, when a single sentence changed everything. To understand why Edward acted without warning, the family would have to revisit the evening when a single conversation turned private concern into an irreversible decision. The breaking point came during a private dinner at Balmoral, long before the ring disappeared from the royal inventory. Nothing dramatic was announced. No voices were raised. Yet one sentence changed the direction of the heirloom forever. Camilla spoke about reorganizing the family collection under her supervision, and Edward watched Lady Louise fall silent across the table. In that instant, he believed something deeply personal was about to be absorbed into a system where memory could be overruled by rank. The family had gathered for a small autumn dinner to review private traditions and decide how treasured objects would be handled under the new reign. For Edward, the discussion carried a painful weight because Balmoral was not merely another royal residence. It held the memory of his mother, the late Queen, and the quiet family customs she had fought to preserve beyond official ceremony. He had brought Louise because her grandmother had wanted younger relatives to understand that history firsthand, not as privilege, but as responsibility. Camilla approached the matter differently. She believed a divided collection invited confusion, rivalry, and future disputes. When the Queen proposed that all unassigned jewelry connected to Balmoral should come under her central supervision before distribution, she believed she was creating order. Central supervision meant placing those objects under one authority so their ownership and future use could be reviewed together. But Edward heard something else. He set down his glass and asked whether pieces already promised within separate branches of the family would also be recalled. Camilla did not hesitate. Nothing should remain beyond review. Louise lowered her eyes. The ring had once been discussed privately with her grandmother, and suddenly that promise felt fragile, vulnerable to a decision made across a dinner table. She stopped speaking, and her father noticed immediately. Edward felt his mother's personal wishes being turned into administrative choices, while the Queen consort saw only a scattered collection that needed protection. Neither raised a voice, yet the silence between them hardened. Later that night, he found his daughter standing alone near a corridor window. Louise admitted that she wanted no heirloom if receiving it meant causing a battle inside the family. Her words struck him harder than anger could have. She was willing to lose the ring rather than use it as a weapon, and that refusal convinced him she was the one person worthy of guarding it. Before leaving Balmoral the next morning, Edward made his decision. He would complete the transfer before the next formal inventory review, the official examination of who held each important family object. Camilla never learned about the conversation between father and daughter, so when she finally summoned him, both entered that room, believing they were defending the late Queen's legacy. What began as a restrained disagreement over stewardship was now moving toward a confrontation in which neither Edward nor Camilla intended to retreat. Camilla did not summon Edward before a committee or surround herself with advisors. She asked to see him alone. When the door closed, the royal language of courtesy lasted less than a minute. The Queen wanted to know why a significant Balmoral heirloom had been transferred without her knowledge. Edward wanted to know why his mother's private intentions required Camilla's approval. Then Louise's name entered the conversation, and a dispute over a ring became a judgment on trust, belonging, and power. Camilla had already confirmed that Edward personally authorized the ring's permanent removal from the working Balmoral collection, the group of family objects kept available for use at the Scottish estate. She had not called him merely to discuss procedure. She wanted to know why he had decided she could not be trusted with the truth. Edward entered knowing that any retreat would humiliate his daughter. Louise had accepted the heirloom with fear rather than triumph, and asking her to return it now would make her feel that she had taken something that was never truly hers. The Queen slid the inventory document across the table. "Did you believe I had no right to know?" she asked. He did not touch the paper. "I believed Louise had a right to receive what was intended for her." The answer struck deeper than refusal. Camilla was wounded, not because she could no longer wear the ring, but because his secrecy suggested she might have ignored a family promise if given the chance. Edward remained controlled until she questioned whether Louise understood the burden attached to such an object. His expression tightened. He reminded her that his daughter had already declined jewelry when she believed accepting it would look like ambition. Camilla pushed back her chair when he said the ring would not be returned. He placed both hands on the table, holding his anger in place before it could take command. Then he revealed the detail that ended any hope of reversal. The transfer had been documented before the updated inventory was circulated. That record made Louise the recognized custodian, meaning she held formal responsibility for protecting the heirloom rather than borrowing it temporarily. Camilla finally admitted why the loss felt so personal. She had considered presenting the ring during a future Balmoral ceremony, believing the gesture would strengthen her connection to an estate still shaped by memories of the late Queen. Edward heard the vulnerability beneath her anger, but he refused to sacrifice his daughter to repair it. The Queen asked whether he alone had decided the matter. He paused, then answered that the final authority behind the transfer had never belonged to him alone. Charles had known. The King's involvement changed everything. Camilla had expected to challenge Edward's judgment, but his final admission meant the true power behind the transfer was waiting somewhere beyond that closed door. Edward had handed the ring to Louise, but another hand had protected his right to do it. Buried inside a private family memorandum was a signature Camilla had not expected to find. King Charles had acknowledged Edward's custodial authority before the transfer took place. The king had not selected Louise himself, yet he had refused to obstruct the decision. For Camilla, that distinction offered little comfort. Her husband had known enough to protect the handover, and had still chosen not to warn her. Charles sat alone with the memorandum after the confrontation, removed his glasses, and pressed his fingers against his forehead. The document was a private family memorandum, meaning a written record used to confirm decisions without turning them into public royal orders. It stated that his brother held authority to decide the ring's future within his own branch of the family. The heirloom belonged to the private collection, not the crown's ceremonial holdings, which were official objects controlled through the monarch's public role. That difference mattered. Camilla could question the decision, but she could not reclaim the ring simply by using her position as queen. Charles called Edward. His voice remained calm, but the warning was unmistakable. He would not reverse the transfer, yet legality had not erased the damage caused by secrecy. His brother replied that delay would have placed Louise's inheritance at risk. The monarch understood the fear behind those words, but he also knew his wife had been made to feel like an outsider inside her own household. Camilla entered before the call had fully left his mind. She did not raise her voice. "Why am I trusted to carry the responsibilities of queen?" she asked, but not trusted with the truth about one ring. Charles struggled to answer, because both sides carried pain he could not dismiss. His brother believed he was protecting their mother's intention. His wife believed the family had quietly decided that her authority ended whenever memory became personal. Then the king admitted what he had withheld. He had feared Camilla would request a delay, and even a short postponement might have allowed the next inventory review to absorb the ring into a wider system. Louise could have lost it without anyone openly denying her. The queen heard the truth, and it hurt more than the secrecy. Her husband had not expected cruelty from her, but he had expected resistance. Charles then showed her the handwritten line beneath the formal wording. The object should remain with someone who valued Balmoral without seeking public advantage. That description pointed unmistakably toward Louise. Camilla said nothing as palace staff began changing future arrangements around the estate. Invitations shifted. Jewelry plans were rewritten. Louise became the silent center of consequences she had never wanted. The king's decision secured the ring in Louise's possession, but it also guaranteed that the fallout would move beyond one private room and into the daily life of the family. The ring was safe, but Lady Louise no longer felt protected by it. Within hours of the confrontation, invitations were revised, conversations shortened, and familiar warmth disappeared from rooms she had once entered without fear. No official punishment was announced. Nothing needed to be. Louise understood that her name had become inseparable from a decision that wounded the Queen. For the first time, the young woman chosen because she wanted no power began to experience exactly how power isolates the person holding it. Palace aides quietly removed the Balmoral Ring from future jewelry planning documents and marked it as privately assigned to her. Those documents were internal lists, used to decide which family pieces could appear at ceremonies and formal gatherings, and the change confirmed that Camilla could no longer claim the heirloom for official use. Edward's household soon received another message. Every future transfer would have to pass through a central liaison, an appointed palace official responsible for carrying information between separate royal households. No one called it punishment, yet the meaning was unmistakable. Trust had narrowed. Louise felt the consequences when a revised invitation arrived for an upcoming Balmoral reception. She read it once, then again, and noticed that a smaller private family gathering had disappeared from her schedule. Her hand tightened around the phone before she closed the message and fought back tears. She told Sophie that she would rather return the ring than become the reason her father was divided from Charles. The trusted confidant refused to let guilt decide her daughter's future. She said surrendering the heirloom now would turn an act of love into an admission of wrongdoing. Louise had not stolen anything. Edward had not acted from greed. Sophie understood the pain around them, but she would not allow her child to carry every adult failure alone. The distance deepened when Camilla declined a luncheon where the young royal was expected. Courtiers could not decide whether the absence was practical or deliberately symbolic, but Louise heard the silence it created. Edward later entered her room and discovered the velvet case locked inside a drawer, still unopened since the handover. His daughter had not worn the ring once. That knowledge broke through his certainty, because the gift he had meant to protect had become something she feared touching. Louise then showed her father a private note she had drafted for the Queen Consort. In it, she explained that she had never asked for the heirloom and had never intended to diminish Camilla's place within the family. Edward offered to send it through palace channels, but she stopped him. A written apology could be filtered, softened, or misunderstood. Louise chose something harder. She requested a private meeting with Camilla, without her father, Charles, or advisors in the room. The adults had turned the ring into a test of authority, but Louise was about to strip away every title and confront Camilla simply as one woman speaking to another. Lady Louise entered the room without the ring, without her father, and without a prepared statement from the palace. Camilla was waiting beside a table, composed but guarded. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Then Louise placed the velvet case between them and said she had not come to return it. She had come to explain why she could not wear it while it represented pain. That single distinction broke through the anger more effectively than any command from a king or argument from a prince. Louise had asked for privacy because she wanted her intentions heard without Edward's protection or palace interpretation changing their meaning. Camilla had agreed reluctantly, expecting an apology, a surrender, or both. Instead, the young royal kept one hand beside the case, making clear that she was neither offering the heirloom back nor displaying it as a victory. She admitted that the transfer had left her ashamed because people she loved were now divided around her. Yet she refused to treat her grandmother's trust as something dishonorable. The Queen listened without interrupting, but the words forced her to face a wound she had hidden beneath authority. She confessed that being excluded had reopened an old fear. No matter how many responsibilities she carried, part of the family might always see her as someone standing outside the true circle. That admission changed the room. Louise no longer heard only anger. She heard a woman frightened that rank could never create belonging. Then she explained the Balmoral dinner in detail. During that private conversation, Edward had watched his daughter withdraw after hearing that every unassigned piece could be brought under central review. Central review meant placing family objects under one authority before deciding where they belonged. Camilla had intended order, but to Louise the language sounded like a warning that a personal promise could be taken away before it was honored. Her father acted only after seeing that fear. The Queen finally understood that her administrative words had reached a young woman as a threat, not a safeguard. Louise told her she had never wanted the ring to prove status, defeat anyone, or weaken her place beside Charles. She wanted only to protect what her grandmother had connected to Balmoral and to family memory. Camilla looked at the case, then closed it firmly and slid it back across the table. "Inheritance should not require humiliation," she said. The younger woman felt the tension loosen, but neither mistook the moment for an easy victory. Their private reconciliation remained unknown beyond that room. Hours later, however, the Queen Consort made a public-facing choice that would decide whether her words had been sincere. Louise left with the ring still inside its case, but Camilla's next decision would reveal to the entire country whether the private peace between them was real. By morning, the transfer was no longer a palace secret. The story erupted across Britain, framed as a humiliating defeat for Camilla and a quiet victory for Edward's family. Yet the image that defined the day was not one of confrontation. At the gates of Balmoral, cameras captured Louise stepping from a car as Camilla reached out to welcome her. On Louise's hand was the ring. On the Queen's face was no anger. The gesture instantly changed the meaning of everything. Palace correspondents had learned that the Balmoral ring now belonged permanently to the young royal, and the discovery triggered a fierce debate over inheritance, family authority, and whether Camilla had been pushed aside by those closest to the late Queen. Correspondents are journalists assigned to follow royal affairs closely, and their early reports presented Edward's decision as an open challenge to the monarch's wife. Pressure rose on both households to explain what had happened, before silence hardened into scandal. One major morning newspaper captured the public mood with a front page showing Balmoral's closed gates, beneath the headline, "The ring Camilla never knew was gone." A television presenter called the handover a private inheritance that has exposed a public fracture, while growing crowds gathered near the estate, waiting to see which version of the family would emerge. Then Louise arrived. She stepped from the vehicle wearing the ring for the first time, no longer hiding it inside the velvet case. Camilla moved toward her without hesitation. The Queen greeted the younger woman, briefly held her hand, and allowed the cameras enough time to capture the heirloom resting between them. It was not an accident. It was an answer. Edward watched from several steps away, relief breaking through the strain he had carried since the transfer. Sophie stood beside him and quietly squeezed his arm, knowing their daughter had entered that moment, afraid of becoming a symbol, and had emerged as the person who repaired the family's public face. The palace then released a concise statement confirming that the ring was Louise's private family inheritance and that Camilla fully respected the transfer. A palace statement is an official message issued to remove uncertainty and establish the royal household's agreed position. Those few lines changed the direction of the story. Public anger softened. Accusations of rejection gave way to admiration for Louise's restraint and the Queen Consort's willingness to recognize the gift without demanding surrender. Yet Edward understood that a public gesture could not erase the private damage. With the conflict outside Balmoral contained, the family gathered behind its doors, where he would finally have to admit what secrecy had cost and what his daughter's courage had repaired. The country had seen the ring and the gesture that protected it, but the final verdict would be delivered inside Balmoral by the family members who had nearly allowed one heirloom to divide them. The final conversation did not end with punishment, surrender, or triumph. It ended with 4 people admitting that the ring had exposed truths none of them could comfortably ignore. Edward had protected a promise, but underestimated the wound caused by secrecy. Camilla had defended her authority, but failed to recognize how easily authority could frighten those without it. Charles had preserved the decision while avoiding the conversation, and Louise, the youngest among them, had shown the courage required to restore what the others had damaged. They met privately at Balmoral after the public appearance, without aides, advisors, or formal procedure standing between them. Formal procedure meant the official rules and staff normally used to guide sensitive royal decisions, but this moment demanded honesty rather than machinery. Edward looked directly at Camilla and apologized for hiding the transfer. He explained that he had feared consultation would become postponement, and postponement would slowly erase his mother's intention until the ring disappeared into another review. The Queen accepted his apology, but she refused to soften the truth. Louise's ownership had never caused the deepest injury. The secrecy had. It told her that the family trusted her position, but doubted her heart. Louise then turned to Charles and promised that she would preserve the heirloom as a family object, never as a symbol of rank or victory. She would keep it tied to Balmoral, where memory mattered more than display. The king listened, then admitted that avoiding conflict had allowed resentment to grow. He promised that future private inheritances would be discussed openly, without letting royal office, the authority attached to official rank, overrule family trust. Camilla asked Louise to open the case. She took the younger woman's hand, adjusted the ring gently, and told her to wear it without guilt. That gesture settled what documents, arguments, and authority could not. Edward then disclosed the final truth through the handwritten family memorandum he had preserved. The late Queen's greatest concern was never which title possessed the ring. She cared whether its next custodian understood that inheritance created responsibility, not superiority. Louise had proved exactly that. She became the recognized and undisputed keeper of the Balmoral Ring. Camilla withdrew every objection. Charles confirmed the transfer, and Edward agreed that no future decision of such emotional weight would be hidden. The handover had not weakened the monarchy. It forced the family to separate control from guardianship and rank from worth. His decision preserved the heirloom, her acceptance restored dignity, and the young woman's compassion prevented inheritance from becoming conquest. And so the Balmoral Ring remained with Lady Louise, not as proof that Camilla had lost, but as proof that the crown survives only when power learns to make room for memory, humility, and grace. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.